All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of our Willow 101 presentation. I'm Alexandria Williams with the Willow Domestic Violence Center, and I am the prevention specialist at the Willow, which basically means I get to go around and give presentations from individuals from third grade all the way up to adulthood about healthy versus unhealthy relationships, as well as just really foundational information about domestic violence. So, um, since COVID is happening, we thought it'd be cool to be able to do this series online. So, if you've been following along since a couple months ago, that's awesome, and I'm glad to have you back again this week. If you're new and you're wanting to watch past videos, we do have a YouTube channel, so please go and check that out. And all of the videos that I have done so far are on that channel. So today we're going to be talking about domestic violence and childhood trauma. So a lot of the times I talk about adults, and last week, I talked about later life abuse that goes on. And so I thought it'd be nice to maybe branch or venture into more of the child's point of view during this violence that's happening within their home. So normally I do talk about more about abuse specifically to this population, but we're going to be kind of just talking about how living in a household where there's domestic violence can have often a negative impact on the children also sharing that home. Um, so I so this is a kind of a big topic. There's a lot of information, so I tried to kind of cut it down to what I found that I thought was really interesting and important. But if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation about this topic, please feel free to email me at awilliams@willowdvcenter.org, Williams being Williams. And lastly, before we jump in today, I do want to go ahead and give a trigger warning. The information that we're talking about today can be triggering to some. It can be difficult to talk about, listen to, so please do what you need to do to take care of yourself during this presentation. It will be recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards, so if you feel like you need to watch it at a later time, that is always an option. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. And I'll read that quote because I know it's kind of long, so you don't have to. So a lot of the information that I got for this presentation today, I found on the National Child Traumatic Stress Network website, and they have a lot of information, not just about DV and how it affects children, but a lot of different information about like how COVID is affecting children, and how having to do their homework or school from home is affecting children, like just different types of stressful situations that might be occurring in their lives. And they offer so much information about the best ways to support the children in your life through these obstacles. So they had a ton of good information. So if you want to go there after we finish today, I definitely recommend that if you want to learn even more about what we're talking about today. So I always like to start off with a quote. If you've been watching, I'm sure that's a routine that you've noticed. So this was a really good one that I found. And it says, a survivor may avoid talking to a child about domestic violence. The parent may assume that a child is too young to understand or that it's better to just move on. But many children who've experienced domestic violence need to talk about it. They may misunderstand what's happening or why it happened. They may blame themselves, blame the survivor, or blame authorities who intervened. They may have fantasies about how they can fix their family. They may take parental silence as a signal to keep silent themselves or to feel ashamed about what happened in their family. And I put this in here because I know, especially doing the work that I do, that there is some nervousness sometimes from parents to even discuss domestic violence. But it is super important to talk about, especially if you are a survivor who has a child who's living in a house with you and also with your abuser, and they are witnessing the violence that's going on. It's a hard discussion to have. It's uncomfortable, but we'll talk more about that too today, about how to go about that. But not talking about it they have found just does a lot more damage to that child later in life. And so, although it is a difficult topic, um, they do encourage you that you are talking with them, you are checking in with them, you are educating them about what is going on. Um, Even if you are currently in a household and there's violence going on, there's no shame in that. There's no blame on you as a survivor. You're doing your best. So while that's happening, it might be hard to find time to kind of talk and find a safe place to do so. But if you can, it's very much encouraged, especially for their emotional development. So, domestic violence does kind of change the dynamic of a family. As we know, children's main responsibility as children in a family are to be children. They're supposed to play and, go to school and be in activities and not really have that many concerns. But what they do find for children who live in a household where there's domestic violence is that the way that the family dynamic might quote unquote normally be is very different for them. So the child might try to protect the parent that is being abused. They might refuse to leave the parent alone at any time out of possible fear that something is going to happen while they're not with them, or the abuser might abuse their parent less when they're around. So they might think that that's their way of trying to take care of the survivor. Children might also try to get in the middle of an abusive event that's going down in hopes that it will de-escalate the situation, but oftentimes that means it's just putting the kid in harm's way. But they feel like, in a sense, that that's their responsibility to try to protect that parent. Um, they also tend to try to call for help as a way to protect an abused parent, as well as trying to draw the attention off that parent and onto them by having quote unquote bad behavior. So maybe acting out as a way to gear that attention off of the survivor and onto them, the child. They might feel also responsible for fixing their family, so they might not want to try to have any problems. This also could be if they aren't wanting to set off the abuser, so trying to be perfect, trying to do everything they're supposed to be doing. And for some children, they think that, well, if I'm perfect enough, like if I don't mess up at all, or if I take care of my younger siblings, my family will be okay. Like this is what is needing to be done to be able to fix it, and that is, as we all know, not the case. But that is how they often feel when there is abuse happening. Also, some children might take the side of the abusive adult. As we know, as we've talked about, abusers can be very manipulative, and it's as we know, kids are very they're sponges, so they just take in all the information that's given to them. So if the abusive adult is manipulating them and feeding them all this information and telling them that, hey, it's okay to be violent towards the survivor, it's okay to yell at them or to do this or to not listen to what they are telling you to do, um, the kid might think that's okay because they're being told it's okay. Um, and they might not notice anything wrong with that type of behavior. So, in some cases, also the abuser will do this purposely to just hurt the survivor even more because the survivor might be really close with the child. It might be the only reason why they're staying in that relationship is for the child. So, to have the child also um, be violent towards the survivor is another form of abuse that the um, abuser is being intentional about. And lastly, we have they may learn the wrong lessons about relationships as a whole. So we know that not every child that grows up in an abusive household will go on to abuse. There are children who will respond to that will respond to that violence by completely trying to avoid being abusive to anyone in their life. But on the other hand, we do have children who will repeat the behavior that they have seen within the abusive relationship in their home, and they will repeat that with their own peers and their future partners commonly. They might learn from the abuser's behavior that it's okay to control another person's behaviors and feelings, or to use violence really to get whatever they want. Those might be the lessons that they're learning that we don't want them to learn. We want them to learn healthy relationship lessons. But unfortunately, they're just oftentimes mirroring the behavior that they're seeing. And they might also equate that hurtful behavior with being loved and being accepted, because that's what they've seen going on. So again, it's our responsibility, people who work in the domestic violence realm, as well as the survivor, to try to have conversations with children, try to establish, how I put that, a dynamic that is stable, and not, and trying to make sure the child knows that it's not their responsibility to fix what's going on. Their responsibility is just being a child. So a couple of statistics that I found were, in homes where there is domestic violence, there is a 45% to 60% chance of co-occurring child abuse. So there is a bigger chance that if the survivor is being abused by the abuser, and those are the parents, that the abuser will eventually start abusing the child as well, not just the survivor. And in households where there is domestic violence, it is 15 times more likely that there will be child abuse if there is a child in the home. And secondly, even when they aren't being physically attacked or even physically or emotionally abused, children do, in these homes, do tend to witness about 68 to 80% of the DV assaults that are happening within the home. So that is a lot of trauma for a child to be experiencing. So, and we're about to get into the effects of that trauma, but it's no surprise that these types of events have long-lasting effects on kids, especially as they're developing during this time. So some of the effects that take place when there is violence within the home is that the child might have ongoing anxiety and depression, as well as emotional distress. They might have trouble eating and sleeping, maybe due to anxiety and depression as well. They might also suffer from physical symptoms. Headaches and stomach aches are the two most common ones I found, as well as having difficulty managing stress. They might have low self-esteem. They're more prone to self-harm, and they often have increased aggression towards their friends and family. They also often feel guilt or blame themselves for the violence happening within the home, which I just want to say this real quick. We know that it is 100% not their fault, and it's 100% not the survivor's fault. It is only the abuser's fault for the violence that's taking place in the home, which is a very important point that I just want everyone to be aware of. They might develop some phobias or have trouble sleeping, which we said before, so insomnia. They might have difficulty forming healthy, long-lasting relationships because they might have never witnessed one. They might not know how to maintain one. They might also have difficulty attending school and completing work, really focusing on school, and really wanting to leave the survivor alone with the abuser to go to school. They might not want to be having to do that. So those are some effects that happen. Some longer term effects that happen that we see are that they suffer from depression, anxiety, PTSD into their adult years. They also tend to struggle with homelessness, the specific population does. They also tend to abuse drugs and alcohol, usually as a way to cope with the trauma. And they tend to experience or use violence/controlling behaviors within their own relationships. So now I kind of want to talk about more of like more specific effects based on the ages of the children. So in utero, so when their mother is pregnant with them, they may be injured in the womb due to violence that's happening between the mother and the abuser. They might also be exposed to drugs and alcohol that the survivor may use to cope with the stress that's going on and the abuse that's going on. When they're babies, they may have difficulty developing attachments with their caregivers. When they're toddlers, they might have eating and sleeping disturbances, which we talked about, as well as development overall might be affected. When they're in the child age, they often struggle with peer relationships, academic performance, and emotional stability. And in their teens, they are at a higher risk of substance abuse, and they do commonly become a survivor victim of dating violence. So now I want to get into the reactions kind of specifically by age. And this is just more in detail of what we were just talking about, because I really want to give more examples so that way people can kind of understand it more than just kind of a vague description of what's going on. So from birth to about age 5, again, with the sleeping, eating disruptions, they might have a withdrawal, lack of responsiveness, intense separation anxiety. So they do not want to be away from, usually the survivor. They want to be with them constantly, all the time, which is kind of normal when they're younger. But as they get older and their brain starts to develop, they do tend to want more independence. But they find when there is abuse in the home that it takes longer for the children to want to gain that independence. There's commonly inconsolable crying, developmental regression, loss of acquired skills. They might suffer from intense anxiety, worries, and or new fears, which is understandable when you're living in a house where there is violence. Always kind of being on edge, not really knowing when the next big episode is going to be occurring. They might also have increased aggression and impulsive behavior, which could also be due to them mirroring and acting out witnessed events in play. So one doll hitting another doll type situation. So now we're going to go into more their childhood years, so like 6 to 11 years. So they might be having nightmares during this time, school avoidance and or truancy, withdrawal and or emotional numbing, difficulty with concentration and task completion in school, which I do not blame them. When you're having all that happen within your home, I can't imagine it being easy to concentrate on math. Increased aggression and difficulty with peer relationships in school. So growing up in a household, a lot of what we know about relationships, we learn from our parents. Pretty much everything we learn about relationships, we learn from our parents, unless it's something we see on TV or in the media. But they really shape how we treat other people. And so if there's a lot of aggression in the household, there's going to be a lot of aggression at school with the child's peers as well. And then lastly, we have 12 to 18 years of age. So again, the anxiety, the depression, often running away, taking part in substance abuse for coping, school truancy, impulsive behavior, failing multiple classes in school, it's pretty common, antisocial behavior, and there's often involvement in violent or abusive dating relationships. And this can mean that the child is the survivor, or it could be that they are mirroring those abusive actions from their abusive parent, and they take on those actions and become the abuser in their own dating relationships. So this is listed on the website that I was telling you all about, and they say a strong relationship with a caring, nonviolent parent is one of the most important factors in helping children grow in a positive way despite their experiences. Your support can make the difference between fear and security and can provide a foundation for a healthy future. So it's not impossible for a child that's living in an abusive environment, and I mean this in the sense of they are witnessing the abuse, um, it's not impossible for them to combat or take some protective measures to not have as many as the long-term effects as we were just talking about. And one of the biggest way they say that is at least having one parent in the household that is nonviolent, one parent that is caring, um, and that is making sure that the child is being taken care of emotionally and physically as well. So, as a parent, if you're a survivor watching this and you have kids in your home and there's violence happening between you and the abuser, I want to talk about what are some things that you can do to kind of um, help your child and keep them on um, a healthy path, I guess, and make sure that or try to help them not mirror the same behaviors that they might be seeing. So, they list a few, so I just wanted to go ahead and talk about some of them. So set clear and regular routines at home it makes daily life more predictable. A lot of the anxiety that kids are feeling within um, these homes is that they just don't know when things are going to happen. They don't know what their day is going to look like. They don't have really any security. So making sure that you can at least have a good set schedule offers them some control in their life, some normalcy, I guess, in their life, in their day-to-day life. Praising your child for the positive things that they do. I know that sounds kind of basic, but like children really do thrive from hearing about what they do well. And they even thrive more when they have a parent telling them all the different things that they love about them, and that they appreciate about them. It really does make a difference in the way that the child overall feels about themselves. Um, so they might have some negative feelings about themselves due to maybe something the abuser has said to them or anything like that. So if you can offer that praise and uplift the positive things that they are doing on a day to day, it really will make a difference for them. Offering your child choices, so not completely controlling everything that they do, and not taking away their choice to either, I don't know, maybe they want to yell and be upset, or maybe they want to go to their room, maybe they want to talk about something, but you at least giving them the choice to do what they feel they need to do in that moment is important because they might not have another space where they're getting offered choices, or they might notice that you don't get to have really any choices. Um, so it's important to be able to offer them that as well. If you see your child mimicking abuse during play, using that moment to talk about their feelings and their worries about the violence that's happening within the home. Again, going back to that first quote we talked about, addressing it, talking about it, um, not keeping it hush hush, letting them know that you know what's going on and explaining what's going on is very important. But it is very common for the children to be mimicking abuse. That is something that they said happens commonly. So going ahead and not getting mad with them about it, but reflecting with them about what it was about, why they're doing that, where did they see that, what does that mean to them, type of thing. Encouraging your child to talk about their fears, very important, that they share what their fears are with you, because then as a parent, you can do whatever you can at that moment to try to alleviate them and make them feel a little bit more safe within their home. Making time for your child. So when you're in a household where you're being abused as a survivor, it might be really hard to try to find some downtime where you can really just spend time with your child, and do whatever they like to do. It could be simple. It could be maybe they just want to color with you. Okay, cool. Then trying to make that time for them so that way that they're feeling special and they're feeling loved and they're feeling seen, um, because it's easy in those situations for them to kind of maybe feel like they're disappearing into the background. So you making time to spend time with them intentionally goes a long way in supporting their resilience overall. And lastly, again, discussing the violence occurring in the home, which we already covered. So lastly, before we wrap up today, um, a couple steps to plan for safety. So you know that I've talked about safety plans on here for survivors. Well, this is more talking about a safety plan for a survivor's child. Um, because as we know, there are a lot of children and a lot of survivors who are living in households with an abuser currently right now, especially during COVID times. So it is important um, that we understand that it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, how could you stay in that household when how could you keep your child in a household where there's abuse happening? And it's easy to say that, but as we talked about before, there are so many barriers to getting help, so many barriers for survivors if they want to leave. So this might be the safest situation, even though there's violence happening. This might be the safest situation for the survivor and their child. So it's important that if you are planning on staying in that situation, that you have a safety plan in place for times where things might get um, incredibly violent. Um, or not even violent physically, it could be emotionally, it could be, I mean, a number of things, but it's important to be prepared and to prepare your child as well. So making sure they know how to call 911 and what warrants a call to 911. Like what kind of emergencies, things like that. Make sure they know the names and phone numbers of any trusted relatives, neighbors, or friends that they can call or go to for help day or night. Very important, especially if they don't have any type of technology. Hiding places and exits within the home, also very important to keeping the child safe. Encouraging the child to stay out of any abusive episodes between the parents. Like I said before, children who live in homes where there's domestic violence tend to try to protect the parent and put themselves in the middle as hopes that it will de-escalate the situation. It almost never does. So making sure that you're having a conversation with them about, well, when this is happening, please go to your room, or please, don't put themselves in harm's way. And lastly, deciding on a safe word, a phrase, or gesture that can be used in times of real danger to signal that they need to use these safety steps or whatever safety steps you have put in place with them. But definitely have this conversation with them and make sure that they are equipped with all the knowledge they need to keep themselves safe. All right. Thank you for joining me again this week, you all. I really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, if you're needing any support or resources, please call our 24-hour hotline, 785-843-3333. It's open 24/7, and there's always an advocate on the other end of the line to talk to you, whether if you have questions, whether if you need to safety plan, or if you're needing to leave an abusive situation, there will be someone there to walk you through it. We also have a website, willowdvcenter.org, that has all of our information about who we are, what services we offer, who works for us, what their roles are, and COVID-19 information is also on there too. All right, well, I will see you next week. Thank you again for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a great day.